They targeted the quiet new girl at America's most elite military academy, trying to break her. They never knew her guardian was Steven Seagal. That was their first, and final, mistake. The morning air at Northgate Military Academy was cold, sharp, and carried the scent of wet pine and discipline. A low mist clung to the parade grounds, muffling the rhythmic crunch of 1,000 boots striking the asphalt in perfect unison. Here, sunrise wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. Granite buildings, old and severe, stood like silent sentinels, their walls etched with the Academy's sacred creed, honor. Disciplina. Fortitudo. Honor. Discipline. Courage. Into this world of rigid order walked a girl named Maya Seagal. She moved through the stream of cadets in their crisp, gray uniforms with a quiet economy of motion that was easily mistaken for invisibility. Her posture was ramrod straight, a product not of the Academy's training but of her own. Her eyes, a deep, watchful brown, absorbed everything, the subtle hierarchy in the way cadets parted for one another, the flicker of anxiety in a freshman's face, the ever-present gleam of security cameras mounted on the eaves of every building. No one gave her a second look. She was just another new face, a junior transfer, a ghost in the machine. That was how she preferred it. Her file in the commandant's office was sparse, academically gifted. Socially reserved. Next of kin and legal guardian, a man named Steven F. Seagal. The name, stripped of its Hollywood gloss, meant nothing to the admissions officer. It was a footnote on a page filled with test scores and a single, generic letter of recommendation. But Maya knew the truth. Silence wasn't safety at Northgate. It was a vacuum, and power, like nature, abhorred it. Her first class was Advanced Strategic History. The instructor, a retired colonel with a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite, introduced her with military brevity. "We have a transfer student. Cadet Seagal. From Oregon. Find a seat." Heads turned. Eyes assessed. She saw the flicker of calculation in them. At Northgate, every new variable was a potential threat or a potential tool. She chose an empty seat at the back, near a window overlooking the misty training fields. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She opened a plain black notebook and began to write, her pen moving with a fluid, controlled rhythm. But the system was already watching. At Northgate, power wasn't just in the rank insignias pinned to a collar, it was a living, breathing entity. And its apex predators had already smelled blood in the water. There were 3 names that echoed in the stone hallways, spoken with a mixture of fear and fawning admiration. Cadet Captain Marcus Thorne was the heir apparent. Tall, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and the easy, predatory grace of someone who had never been told no, he commanded the Corps of Cadets. His father, General Marcus Thorne Sr., was a 4-star legend at the Pentagon and the Academy's most influential benefactor. When Thorne spoke, his voice carried the weight of future command and a portrait that would one day hang in the Hall of Valor. Caleb Vance was Thorne's enforcer. Built like a siege engine, with a thick neck and hands that seemed too big for his body, he was the physical manifestation of the Academy's brutal underbelly. His mother, Isabel Vance, was the CEO of a titan in the world of private military contracting, a firm that supplied Northgate with everything from tactical gear to security consultants. Vance moved with the swagger of someone backed by corporate-funded impunity. And then there was Julian Croft Jr., the ghost in Northgate's machine. Slender and pale, he was rarely seen without a tablet in his hand. His father, a reclusive tech billionaire, had designed and installed the Academy's entire state-of-the-art surveillance and network infrastructure. Croft didn't need to raise his voice. He weaponized whispers, creating memes, rumors, and digital phantoms that could ruin a cadet's reputation before they even knew they were under attack. They saw Maya on her first day. During lunch in the cavernous, echoing mess hall, she sat alone, her movements precise as she ate, her gaze never lingering. "Look at that," Vance mumbled to Thorne, nudging him with an elbow. "New toy. Doesn't even know the rules yet." Thorne's eyes narrowed, a smirk playing on his lips. She's too quiet. It's unnatural. It's a sign of weakness. Croft, without looking up from his screen, added in a monotone, subject name, Maya Seagal. No digital footprint. No social media, no tagged photos, nothing. It's like she didn't exist before last week. He swiped a finger across his tablet. A small, almost invisible drone, disguised as a dragonfly, detached from the mess hall's ceiling and hovered for a moment, its lens focused on Maya, before returning to its perch. Analysis, a blank slate. Or a very well-wiped one. Either way, an anomaly. Thorne's smirk widened. Anomalies need to be corrected. Let's start the diagnostic. The first test was subtle. That evening, as Maya returned to her stark, simple room in the barracks, she found a single, glossy photograph slipped under her door. It was a high-angle shot, clearly taken from a drone, of her sitting alone at lunch. Across the bottom, in crisp, digital text, were the words, Unit 734. Status, isolated. Awaiting integration protocol. She picked it up. Her expression didn't change. There was no watermark, but she knew the source. It was Croft's digital signature. A test. A probe to see if she would react, report, or crumble. She didn't do any of them. She looked at the photo, at her own isolated image, and felt not fear, but a cold, familiar clarity. She slid the photo into her notebook, closed the door, and began her nightly ritual of stretches and breathing exercises. The game had begun. She hadn't wanted to play. But at Northgate, you didn't get a choice. The first probe had failed to elicit a response. So, the system adapted. The pressure intensified, becoming a part of Maya's daily existence at Northgate, woven seamlessly into the fabric of academy life. The bullying wasn't overt, not the kind a civilian might recognize. It was sophisticated, insidious, and deeply personal, designed to exploit the very structure of their world. During morning obstacle course drills, the thick rope she was climbing would suddenly, inexplicably, grow slick with a clear, odorless gel, causing her to lose her grip and fall the last 10 feet into the mud pit below. Caleb Vance would jog past, a ghost of a grin on his face. Tough break, Seagal. Gotta have better grip strength. The supervising officer would just mark a demerit in his log for failure to complete the obstacle. No questions asked. In tactical simulations in the Academy's sprawling woodlands, her comms unit would crackle with static at critical moments, feeding her false coordinates supplied by Julian Croft's digital manipulations. She would find herself miles off course, alone, while the rest of her squad completed the objective. This led to more demerits, this time for lack of situational awareness and failure to maintain unit cohesion. Cadet Captain Thorne used his authority with surgical precision. He assigned her to the most grueling and thankless tasks: late-night guard duty shifts in the rain, inventory duty in the dusty quartermaster's basement, cleaning the brass on the Academy's main gates until her fingers were raw. Each was presented as a normal part of cadet life, but the pattern was undeniable. She was being systematically isolated, exhausted, and branded as incompetent. The whispers followed her everywhere. Croft's digital campaign was relentless. Memes appeared on the cadets' encrypted social network, a picture of a robot with her face crudely photoshopped on, captioned, "Scanning for human emotion. 0% found." Another was a diagram of a ghost with the label, Cadet Seagal's contribution to squad maneuvers. They were never sent to her directly, but she saw them on the screens of others, saw the smirks and quiet laughs that followed. Through it all, Maya remained a fortress of calm. She endured the mud, the isolation, the public humiliation with an unnerving stoicism. She never complained. She never explained. She simply took the demerits, completed her punishment details, and met every challenge with the same quiet resolve. But inside, the pressure was building a wall, brick by heavy brick. It wasn't anger she felt, not yet. It was a weight. The constant vigilance was draining. The injustice was a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She wasn't afraid of them. She was afraid of what she might be forced to become to survive them. That weekend, during her designated leave, she was in the small, functional gym behind the unassuming suburban house she shared with her guardian. The room smelled of wood, sweat, and discipline. A worn wooden dummy, a mahjong, stood in the center, its arms scarred with 1,000 strikes. She moved, her breath controlled, her feet silent on the padded floor. Tan sao. Pak sao. Bong sao. Block, strike, flow. Each movement was a prayer of precision, a meditation in motion. These were not exercises, they were the language she had been taught since she was a child. Steven Seagal appeared in the doorway, a silent, imposing figure. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched. He saw it not in her form, which was perfect, but in the tension in her shoulders, the almost imperceptible hardness in her strikes. The grace was there, but the peace was gone. "You're hitting too hard," he finally said, his voice a low rumble. "You're trying to break the wood. The point is to understand it, to move with it." Maya stopped, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. She wiped a bead of sweat from her temple. "I'm fine." He walked closer, his presence filling the small space. "Fine is a word people use when the truth is too heavy to carry," he said. He rested a hand on the wooden dummy's arm. "Your technique is a conversation. Right now, it sounds like you're shouting. Tell me, Maya. What are they doing to you at that school?" She finally looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the crack in her armor. Her voice was low, devoid of emotion, as she recounted the incidents, the sabotaged gear, the digital ghosts, the relentless, quiet campaign of psychological warfare. She didn't color it with emotion. She presented it like a field report. When she finished, he nodded slowly. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes held a glacial fury. "They are testing your control," he said. "They are trying to provoke a reaction they can punish. They are cowards, using the system as a weapon because they are too weak for a direct confrontation." He looked her straight in the eye. "Do not give them the reaction they want. Control is your shield. But remember, a shield can also be a weapon. You don't have to absorb every blow. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let their own force work against them. Know when to stand firm, and when to step aside and let the charging bull crash into the wall." Maya nodded, the knot in her stomach loosening just a fraction. She wasn't alone in this. He understood. She returned to Northgate that Sunday evening, the weight still there, but now, it felt different. It was no longer just a burden, it was a coiled spring. And she knew, with chilling certainty, that they would keep pushing until it was forced to uncoil. The week that followed was an exercise in escalating cruelty. The silence around Maya was no longer passive, it was predatory. The calm before the storm. On Monday, she found her parade rifle, the one she was required to keep in pristine condition, disassembled into more than 50 pieces and laid out on her bunk. A note, printed in the same digital font as before, lay beside it, "Some assembly required. Let's see if the robot can follow instructions." She spent 3 hours meticulously cleaning and reassembling it, missing evening meal, her fingers numb and sore. On Wednesday, during a live-fire exercise, her assigned target inexplicably failed to register any of her hits, leading the range master to publicly berate her for her abysmal marksmanship. Later, she saw Croft showing Vance a program on his tablet that could remotely disable the scoring sensors on the target range. They laughed. The tension was palpable, a charge in the air waiting for a spark. It came on Thursday afternoon. Cadet Captain Thorne approached her after formation. "Seagal," he said, his tone clipped and official. "The Commandant's office requested a full inventory of the pre-World War I training artifacts. They're stored in the armory sublevel. Get it done by 1800 hours." It was an order from a superior officer. To disobey was a serious offense. She nodded once. Yes, Captain. She knew it was a trap. The armory sublevel was a relic, a labyrinth of brick-walled corridors and vaulted storage rooms beneath the main building. It was poorly lit, rarely used, and a dead zone for all comm signals. It was the perfect place for an ambush. She walked towards the old stone staircase, her senses on high alert. The air grew colder, smelling of damp earth, gun oil, and decay. She descended into the gloom, her footsteps echoing softly. She unlocked the heavy steel door to the designated storage vault with a key from the quartermaster. The room was filled with wooden crates, dusty footlockers, and racks of decommissioned, antique rifles. She began the inventory, her movements calm and deliberate, her mind a whirlwind of calculation. She noted every exit, every potential weapon, every shadow. Then came the sound. The soft, metallic click of the vault door being locked from the outside. She didn't freeze. Her breathing slowed, her body settling into a state of relaxed readiness. She could hear them before she saw them, the scrape of boots on concrete, a low chuckle. 3 figures emerged from the deeper shadows of the corridor, blocking the only way out. Thorne stood in the center, leaning against the wall, his phone already out and recording, the red light a malevolent eye in the darkness. Vance cracked his knuckles, a wide, brutish smirk on his face. Croft hung back, a tablet glowing in his hands, his expression a mixture of clinical curiosity and smug superiority. "Looks like the little ghost is trapped," Vance growled, taking a step forward. "Official business, Seagal," Thorne said smoothly, his voice dripping with condescending authority. "We're conducting an unofficial performance review. The Board of Cadets has found your attitude lacking." Maya remained silent, her eyes flicking between the 3 of them, assessing, waiting. Her hands were loose at her sides. "What's the matter?" Vance taunted, closing the distance. "Cat got your tongue? Or did you forget to install the voice module this morning?" He was close now, invading her personal space, his size meant to intimidate, to overwhelm. "I'm going to make you react. I want to see if there's anything inside that shell." And then he did it. He reached out, his hand moving to grab her shoulder, to shove her against the wall. It was the last mistake he would ever make at Northgate. Maya's body didn't just react, it flowed. In the instant before his fingers made contact, she shifted her weight, pivoting on the ball of her right foot. His forward momentum, meant to overpower her, became his undoing. She didn't block his hand, she guided it. Her left hand met his wrist in a tenkaikote, a turning wrist lock. It wasn't a strike but a redirection. His arm was twisted, his shoulder joint locking painfully. He gasped, his smirk vanishing into a mask of shock and agony. As his body was pulled off balance, her right elbow struck a pressure point on his upper arm with pinpoint precision. Not a blow to break, but one to disable. The nerve cluster screamed, and his entire arm went numb. He crumpled to his knees, a choked groan escaping his lips. Thorne, stunned, cursed and lunged forward, throwing a wild, telegraphed punch. Maya ducked under the clumsy attack. His momentum carried him past her. In one fluid motion, she rose up behind him, her arms snaking up under his armpits to lock her hands behind his head. It was a classic kokyunage, a breath throw. She didn't lift him, she dropped her center of gravity, and using his own forward energy, flipped him effortlessly over her hip. He landed hard on his back, the air exploding from his lungs in a pained wheeze. His phone skittered across the concrete floor, still recording. Croft stood frozen, his tablet clutched to his chest, his face pale with disbelief. The digital puppet master was useless without his strings. He saw Maya turn her gaze to him, her expression not angry, not triumphant, but utterly, terrifyingly calm. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. "Don't," he stammered, holding his tablet up like a shield. "Don't touch me." Maya didn't advance. She stood over the 2 groaning figures on the floor, her breathing even. She looked directly at Thorne's phone, which was now recording the ceiling. "Don't touch me again," she said, her voice low, steady, and carrying the cold weight of a final warning. "Don't say my name. Don't record me. I am not your toy." She turned, walked to the locked vault door, and with a single, perfectly placed kick near the locking mechanism, burst it open. The old metal screamed and gave way. She walked up the stairs and back into the light, leaving the three most powerful cadets at Northgate broken and bewildered in the darkness. She didn't see the other figure, huddled behind a stack of crates at the far end of the corridor. It was Lena Reyes, a quiet, unassuming girl who worked as an assistant in the quartermaster's office. She had come down to retrieve a misplaced ledger. She had seen everything. And her own phone, clutched in a trembling hand, had recorded it all from a second, clearer angle. 2 hours later, Maya sat in a high-backed leather chair in the Academy Commandant's office. The room was a shrine to institutional power, paneled in dark mahogany and decorated with oil paintings of stern-faced men who had once walked these grounds. Across a desk the size of a small boat sat Commandant Hayes, a man whose spine seemed to be permanently fused to his chair. Flanking him were the Director of Cadet Affairs and the Academy's legal counsel. On a large screen between them was a frozen image from Thorne's phone, a chaotic, blurry shot of Thorne on the ground and Vance clutching his arm. The audio had been conveniently corrupted. "Cadet Seagal," Commandant Hayes began, his voice laced with practiced disappointment. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for physical violence at Northgate. You assaulted 2 of your superior officers. They ambushed me. They locked me in. They attacked me first," Maya stated, her voice calm and even. The Director of Cadet Affairs, a woman with a severe haircut and a pinched expression, consulted a file. "Cadet Captain Thorne and Cadets Vance and Croft have all submitted sworn statements. They claim you misinterpreted an order, became hysterical in the sub-level, and attacked them without provocation when they attempted to calm you down." "That is a lie," Maya said, without raising her voice. "What is not a lie, Cadet?" the Commandant interjected, leaning forward, "is that you, a junior transfer, single-handedly incapacitated 2 of the most promising young men in this institution. Their injuries, a dislocated shoulder for Vance, severe contusions for Thorne, are significant. The optics are, to put it mildly, catastrophic." Maya felt a cold stillness settle over her. They weren't investigating, they were damage controlling. "Due to the severity of this incident," Hayes continued, his gaze unwavering, "you are hereby suspended, effective immediately, pending a full expulsion hearing. You will be confined to your quarters until your guardian can retrieve you tomorrow morning." Maya stood. "I understand, sir. I will have my guardian come in." She walked out of the office, the weight of their institutional betrayal heavier than any physical blow. The news had already spread. Cadets stared as she walked back to her barracks, their whispers like the hissing of snakes. She didn't look at them. She packed her duffel bag with the same precision she had used to assemble her rifle. That evening, sitting on the edge of her bunk in the silent room, she called her guardian. The next morning, the air in the Commandant's formal conference room was thick with tension and the smell of expensive cologne. Commandant Hayes sat at the head of a long, polished table. On one side sat Thorne, Vance, and Croft, looking sullen and bruised. Beside them sat their parents, a triumvirate of immense power. General Thorne, in his immaculate dress uniform, radiated an aura of absolute command. Isabel Vance, the PMC CEO, was sharp and severe in a tailored business suit, her eyes like chips of ice. Julian Croft Sr., the tech mogul, attended via a large, hyper-realistic video screen, his face a neutral, unreadable mask. They were there not for a hearing, but for a coronation of their version of the truth. The door opened. Commandant Hayes looked up, expecting to see a bewildered or intimidated civilian. Instead, Steven Seagal entered. He wasn't dressed in a suit. He wore a simple black shirt and a dark, functional jacket. He moved with an unhurried, almost liquid grace, but his presence seemed to suck the very air out of the room. Every head turned. The cadets shifted uncomfortably. Even General Thorne's ramrod posture seemed to stiffen. Behind him, Maya walked in, her face composed, her gaze fixed forward. They took the empty seats opposite the parents. No greetings were exchanged. Mr. Seagal, the commandant began, clearing his throat. As we've explained, this is a formal proceeding to ratify Maya's expulsion based on her unprovoked assault. Stop, Steven said. The word was not loud, but it cut through the room's formal atmosphere like a razor. The commandant froze, mid-sentence. Steven's eyes, dark and piercing, swept across the faces of the parents. You've all heard one story. Now you're going to see another. He placed a small, unlabeled USB drive on the polished table. Play it. The Academy's lawyer hesitated, looking at the commandant. General Thorne scoffed. We're not watching some doctored home movie. Play it, Steven repeated, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a new, harder edge. Reluctantly, the lawyer inserted the drive into the laptop connected to the room's projector. The screen flickered to life. The video was from a different angle. It was clear, stable, and the audio was pristine. It was Lena Reyes's footage. The room watched in stunned silence as the entire event unfolded, exactly as it had happened. They heard Thorne's taunts. They heard Vance's threats. They saw his hand reach for Maya. And then they saw her response, swift, defensive, perfectly controlled. They saw her disable her attackers without a single wasted motion, without a trace of malice. They heard her final, clear warning. The video ended. No one spoke. The silence was a physical thing, pressing down on them. Isabel Vance's face was ashen. The image of Julian Croft Sr. on the screen seemed to flicker, his composure finally cracking. General Thorne stared at the blank screen, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle pulsed in his cheek. He had built his life on the concept of honor, and he had just watched his son defile it. Commandant Hayes stared at Steven, his face a mixture of shock and fear. We were not aware of this footage. Steven leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. You weren't aware because you didn't look. You didn't ask. You saw a quiet girl and 3 powerful boys, and you chose the story that was easier for you. You chose to protect the powerful, not the innocent. He paused, his gaze locking onto the commandant. Maya's suspension is lifted. Her record is cleared. This meeting is over. He stood up, as did Maya. They turned and walked towards the door, leaving a room full of powerful people choked by the one thing their money and influence could not defeat, the undeniable truth. Leaving Northgate with Maya's name cleared was not a victory, it was merely the end of the first battle. Steven Seagal knew that the system that had tried to crush his niece was still in place. The roots of the corruption ran deep, watered by money, power, and a culture of impunity. Cutting off one branch would do nothing. He had to poison the root. That afternoon, back in the quiet sanctuary of his home, the strategist took over from the Guardian. The house, usually a place of calm and training, became a war room. His first call was to a man named David Chen, an attorney who had left a lucrative corporate law practice to specialize in education rights and civil liberties. Chen was a bulldog, a legal savant who delighted in dismantling corrupt institutions. David, Steven said, his voice low and calm as he sat at his dining room table, laptop open. I'm sending you a file. I need a full legal workup. Bylaws, donor agreements, administrative codes of conduct for Northgate Military Academy. Cross-reference everything with state and federal anti-bullying statutes and Title IX. I want to know every single rule they broke. His next call was to a woman known only as Echo. She was a former military intelligence analyst who now ran a private consulting firm. Her specialty was opposition research and digital forensics. Echo, I have a job for you, Steven said, forwarding the names of General Thorne, Isabel Vance, and Julian Croft Sr. I want to know everything. public contracts, pending lawsuits, shareholder anxieties, personal scandals. I want to know where the skeletons are buried. Also, I'm sending you 2 video files. The first is from a high-end surveillance drone. The second is from a standard smartphone. I need you to find the man who built the system that drone belongs to and find out how he uses it. The response was swift. Within hours, information began to flow. Chen sent back a detailed brief, highlighting no fewer than 17 procedural violations in the Academy's handling of Maya's case, including a clear failure to protect a student and a blatant disregard for their own investigative protocols. Echo's initial report was even more damning. She confirmed Julian Croft Sr.'s company not only managed Northgate security but also used the campus as a beta testing ground for new, often invasive, surveillance technologies. She discovered a digital trail showing that Julian Croft Jr. had administrative-level access to the network, and that logs from the Armory sublevel on the day of the incident had been selectively wiped. It was a digital smoking gun. Then, an email arrived from an anonymous, encrypted address. They know a video is out, but they don't know it's mine. I have a clean, high-resolution copy with embedded metadata, time, date, GPS coordinates. They can't discredit it. Use it. It was from Lena Reyes. The final piece of the puzzle. Steven assembled the package. It was a masterpiece of strategic warfare. It included the high-resolution, metadata-stamped video of the assault. Echo's forensic report detailing the network tampering by Julian Croft Jr. An expert analysis from a retired FBI profiler on the systematic, predatory nature of the bullying. David Chen's legal brief, outlining the Academy's massive liability and potential for a catastrophic, reputation-destroying lawsuit. A summary of Echo's opposition research, hinting at scandals that would make General Thorne's political allies and Isabel Vance's corporate shareholders extremely nervous. He didn't send it to the Academy. That would be like warning an enemy of an impending attack. Instead, he had Chen draft an official, formal demand for a full, emergency meeting of the Northgate Board of Trustees to review the conduct of the administration and the involved cadets. The demand was sent directly to the chairman of the board, a respected retired judge, bypassing Commandant Hayes entirely. A separate, heavily encrypted copy of the entire evidence package was sent to a single, trusted investigative journalist at a major national newspaper, with a simple instruction: hold until you hear from me. If you don't hear from me by 1800 tomorrow, publish everything. It was an insurance policy. A checkmate. He sat back, the plan in motion. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't thrown a punch. But he had just launched a surgical strike aimed directly at the heart of the institution. He wasn't just defending Maya anymore. He was going to dismantle the machine that had tried to break her, piece by piece. The war for Northgate's soul had begun. Part 6, The Reckoning and Rebirth. The emergency meeting of the Northgate Board of Trustees was convened in the Academy's oldest and most intimidating room, the Founders' Hall. The portraits of a dozen stern-faced founders stared down from the walls, their painted eyes serving as silent judges. The air was thick with a gravity that had been absent from the previous meeting. This time, Commandant Hayes was not in charge. He sat at the far end of the table, looking pale and diminished. General Thorne, Isabel Vance, and Julian Croft Sr. were present again, but their arrogance had been replaced by a tense, brittle anger. They had been summoned, not invited, and the shift in power was galling. At the head of the table sat the chairman of the board, retired federal judge Alastair Finch, a man whose reputation for integrity was absolute. Steven Seagal and Maya entered and took their seats. The silence was absolute. Judge Finch began, his voice calm and authoritative. This board has been convened to review a matter of grave importance. We have received a formal petition alleging administrative misconduct, a failure to protect a student, and a subsequent cover-up. Mr. Seagal, the floor is yours. Steven didn't stand. He simply slid a single, sleek black folder to the center of the table. Everything you need to know is in there. The judge opened it. For the next 20 minutes, he read, his expression growing more severe with each page. He then passed the folder to the other board members. A low murmur of shock rippled through the room as they saw the evidence laid bare, the pristine video, the forensic report on the wiped server logs, the legal analysis of their own broken rules. General Thorne finally broke the silence, his voice tight with fury. This is an outrageous attack on the character of these boys and this institution. Steven finally looked at him. Your son, General, used his rank to corner a junior cadet. He filmed the assault for his own amusement. That is not an attack on his character. That is his character. Isabel Vance jumped in. My son is a boy. Boys are rough. This is being blown completely out of proportion. Your son, Steven countered, his voice cold as steel, participated in a systematic campaign of psychological and physical abuse. Your company profits from teaching soldiers how to survive in hostile environments. It's a shame you never taught your son not to create one. He then turned his attention to the silent image of Julian Croft Sr. on the monitor. And you, Mr. Croft. You gave your son the keys to a kingdom of surveillance, and he used it to become a digital tyrant. He didn't just bully her, he tried to erase the truth. That is a crime. Judge Finch raised a hand, silencing the sputtering protests. The evidence presented here is overwhelming. It depicts not a simple schoolyard fight, but a malicious, premeditated conspiracy, followed by an administrative failure of shocking proportions. He looked directly at Commandant Hayes. You are hereby placed on indefinite administrative leave, pending the board's final vote on your termination. He then turned to the three cadets. Thorne, Vance, and Croft are expelled from Northgate, effective immediately. A gasp went through the room. General Thorne slammed his fist on the table. You would ruin the careers of three promising young men over this. Steven stood up, his full presence commanding the room. Their careers are not your concern anymore. Your concern is the investigative journalist who has this entire file and is waiting for my call. Your concern is the lawsuit that will expose every dirty secret of this institution if you do not fix it, right now. He paused, letting the weight of the threat settle. This wasn't just about one student. You have fostered a culture where the powerful are protected and the honorable are silenced. That ends today. The fight went out of them. The general slumped in his chair. Isabel Vance stared blankly. On the screen, Julian Croft Sr. simply terminated the connection. The change at Northgate was swift and seismic. Judge Finch took temporary control of student affairs. A new, transparent anti-bullying and whistleblower protection program was instituted, named the Aegis Initiative. A week later, Maya returned to a different school. Cadets no longer stared at her, they nodded with a newfound respect. The whispers were gone. In their place was a quiet sense of awe. The following Thursday, the first meeting of a new club was held in the auxiliary gym. Maya had called it the Honor Guard Club. Over 50 students showed up, boys and girls, upper and lower class men. Lena Reyes was there, helping to sign people in. Maya didn't give a speech. She simply stepped onto the center of the mat. True strength isn't about how hard you can hit, she said, her voice clear and steady. It's about having the discipline to not have to. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. Let's begin. She then began to demonstrate simple, effective techniques for de-escalation, self-defense, and using an attacker's momentum against them. As the weeks went by, the club grew. It became a symbol of the new Northgate. One evening, as Maya was packing up, Caleb Vance appeared in the doorway. He was in civilian clothes, his posture no longer arrogant. I wanted to see, he mumbled, not meeting her eye. What you do? Maya looked at him for a long moment. You're welcome to join, Caleb, she said. He just nodded and walked away, but it was a start. That evening, Maya sat on the back porch of the house with Steven. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. "How was it?" he asked, sharpening a wooden practice staff. "It was good," she said, a sense of peace settling over her. "We're building something." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "That's the difference, Maya. Bullies tear things down. Warriors build things up." She looked out at the fading light, the weight she had carried for so long finally gone, replaced by a quiet strength. She had faced the storm and had not broken. And in doing so, she had taught an entire institution that the most powerful force in the world isn't rank or money. It's the courage to stand up and speak the truth. The story of what happened at Northgate spread, a quiet legend in a world that's often too loud. It showed that one person's courage, backed by unwavering principle, can change everything. What do you think is the most important element of true strength? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Please, comment with respect for everyone's perspective. For more stories that inspire and empower, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The biggest stories are yet to come.